Do you want to improve the communication in your marriage? I'm going to give you 4 things in this episode that will exponentially improve the communication in your marriage. In fact, I have clients who love to call it elite communication. And if you really implement what I'm about to share with you, your conversation, whether you're starting with bad communication, mediocre, pretty good communication, you will up level it to the quality of elite communication if you implement what I'm about to share with you. What I want to share with you now, I haven't heard anybody else say, and it really is a game changer if you implement it. And that is to be clear what kind of communication you are about to have. That sounds so basic, but it truly is a game changer because very often one person will share how they're feeling and the other person will respond trying to fix a problem and it goes south. Or one person will want to bring up something logistical and the other person responds with how they feel. There is so much mismatch in what the actual purpose of the exchange is that success becomes totally elusive and impossible. But when you become really clear what kind of communication you're about to have, and your partner knows it too, then you're both intelligent, you both understand what that means, and you can create incredible elite communication. When I work with couples in private coaching, one of the things that I often do is have them make a list of the different kinds of communication that they have because it's not the same for all couples. And the words you would use to describe it are also not going to be the same. But maybe you have logistical conversations. Who's going to pick up the kids? Are you going to get the turkey or am I? Like logistical communications to clarify what needs to happen. That is one kind of communication. Another kind of communication is venting. And when one of you is venting, the other person doesn't need to give rapt attention and catch every last detail. You just need to be a safe receptacle for your spouse to vomit out whatever is in their heart and soul so they feel better. And you just let it float on by. You do not need to look at that trash as it passes you by. Just make it safe for your spouse to empty. You may do problem solving where you want to figure out which contractor to use for your kitchen renovation or what are you going to do because the flight was canceled. And there are all kinds of problem solving conversations you're going to have. Maybe you're going to do vulnerable shares where you share what you're thinking about, what your fears are, what your desires are, and you just want to be heard. It's not a problem to solve. It's not venting. It is sharing what is alive inside you. I mean, this is not an exhaustive list. Most couples, they come up with at least 10 different kinds of communication, and it depends if you're empty nesters, if you have young children, if you have children who are adolescents, if you're in business together. All of these things influence the different types of communications you have. And when you can get really clear about the different types, and when you're doing one, you stick with that type, and when you're doing another, you stick with that type, that will resolve so many different problems because you'll both have the same purpose in that exchange. So, that is the first thing that really is a game changer. The second thing to improve communication is once you know what kind of communication you want to make, then say so. For example, I'd like to look at the schedule for the next week. Are you available to do that? And then you have a conversation looking at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., looking at the schedule for the next week. This is not suddenly an opportunity to bring up some past hurt because your mother in law said XYZ last July. No, this is a conversation on next week's scheduling. If you want to make a vulnerable share, something that you feel hesitant to speak, but you actually want to share it with your spouse, then you can say, I have something vulnerable to share. Are you available to hear it now? And it's really important that if you receive a question along those lines, that you answer honestly. Don't just automatically say yes. If you actually are super distracted and you have a deadline, you're a physician and you haven't finished writing your charts that night, or your child is about to finish a show and come in and cling to you, that is not the time to say, yes, I'm available, because you're not. So when you say, I want to make a vulnerable share, are you available to hear it? It has to be a real question. And when you respond, it has to be a truthful answer. And then you can have that kind of conversation that you're both lined up to have. The third tip that I have for you does not apply to all conversations. You'll need to decide which conversations it applies to in your relationship. But one of the things that leads to disconnection and dissatisfaction when it comes to marital communication is when one person is expressive and the other person has no idea how long it's going to go on for. My strong recommendation when it applies is that you set a timer. It was radically impactful in the best ways, and I experienced so much more connection with my husband when I just made the change to say, can I tell you something? I think it's going to take about 10 minutes. Now, let me tell you the number of times I was actually complete in 10 minutes back in those days when I was still unaware of different kinds of communications. I don't think I ever really felt done after 10 minutes. But at the 10-minute mark, I would say, can we go another 10 minutes? In other words, we renegotiated, and where I might have initially said, can we go another 10 minutes? It might have ended up being an hour. Or after those 10 minutes, when I said, can I go another 10 minutes? He would say, actually, no, I have to take care of this and that. And I needed to accept that, even though I didn't feel done. That is how we co created conversations that we both could trust one another's words on in terms of how they were going to happen. So, sure, if you're just making a plan for who's going to pick up dinner, you do not need to decide how long that's going to take. But anything that is looking at something more potentially problematic, where there may be landmines, where there may be meandering explorations, then just decide how long it's going to be and be clear about that. Now, if both of you are more avoidant and not very chatty, you don't actually need this tip. But where one of you or both of you is more long winded and expressive, then I highly recommend creating a set time for the conversation, and you'll both feel more satisfied, even if you extend it multiple times. So, the most important tip that I have shared is to get clear on the different kinds of communications and be really clear which one you want to have. And then the second thing, which is kind of a companion to that, is to tell your partner what kind of communication you want to have and have them opt in to participate. And then the third thing, if one of you tends to be very expressive and then the other one is at risk of feeling trapped, is to just be clear and set a time frame for that conversation so it doesn't feel like you're going to be out at sea indefinitely. The shore is always in view. And then the fourth thing that I want to share after you implement all of these things is to stop when you're ahead. And let me explain what I mean. Very often, if you're a person or a couple that likes to process things, what happens is that you start processing, you start discussing whatever you need to discuss, things are going well, and then things don't go well, things become contentious, complicated, unkind, whatever it is that isn't harmonious. And that's when you stop the conversation because you don't want to be in that unpleasantness any longer. Well, if you get to that kind of unpleasantness and you want to stop, by all means stop. But what I want to heartily recommend is that you stop the conversation before you get to that point so that you start in harmony, you have whatever conversation you need to have, and then you end in harmony and don't have the ending determined by things getting really unpleasant and uncomfortable. If you have a lot of disagreements and fighting in your marriage, stopping before it gets there is really going to help you. It's a little bit like if someone overeats and they are used to eating until their belly just feels so full that they can't eat anymore. It is so valuable to learn to stop eating when you've had enough, but you haven't gotten to where you're stuffed. So use that as an analogy in your conversations. Have conversations on difficult topics and you continue until you just have to go your separate ways because you've both had, or one of you has had enough. Well, you're not going to look forward to the next conversation where you have to discuss something difficult. But if you start in harmony and you end in harmony, then you're going to trust that you can have these conversations and be much more available to have another one sometime soon because you know that it doesn't always have to end in chaos and unpleasantness. So, I hope that this has really stimulated you to reflect on the kinds of interactions you have with your spouse that you enjoy and the ones that you have that you don't enjoy and the ones that you don't even have but you want to be having, and go forth and communicate more. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this and let me know what kinds of conversations you and your spouse have. I'd love to know. And if you're having difficulty identifying, you can get inspiration from other people who post. And if this spoke to you, please subscribe to my channel. I share tips and tools frequently, and I'd love for you to be able to benefit. So go ahead and press the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.